before crowns were weighed by gold, before laws were written to favor the weak and punish the strong. There were men who survived by blade, will, and silence. Kriakk was forged in that older world. A land of broken empires, blood-soaked roads, and gods who never answered prayers. He learned early that mercy is a luxury, and survival is paid for in pain. He does not seek glory. He does not serve kings. He walks where death is certain and returns only because the world has failed to stop him. This is an age of cruelty and consequence. And this is a tale of Kriakk.
Kriakk's vision blurred, the alien night swallowing everything but the wet heat blooming across his chest. Blood poured from the ragged gashes where the bear's claws had opened him like a gutted fish. The rock in his fist felt heavier than sin, slick with his own sweat and the beast's spit. No time to scream, no time to curse Bay Sin's name, only the thunder of the bear's next charge. It came low and fast, a mountain of black fur and yellowed fangs crashing through the underbrush. Kriakk rolled, the motion tearing fresh fire through his torn ribs. The bear's paw slammed down where his head had been, splintering stone and root alike. Dirt exploded into his eyes. He swung blind, once, twice, the rock cracking against the beast's foreleg with a wet crunch. The bear bellowed, a sound like mountains splitting, and reared again. Claws raked the air, one hooked his shoulder, spinning him like a rag doll. Kriakk tasted iron and soil as he hit the ground. Pain was a living thing now, chewing through muscle and bone. He forced himself up on shaking legs, rock raised high. The bear lunged. He met it head-on, driving the stone into the side of its muzzle with everything he had left. Teeth shattered. Blood. Thick. Hot. Stinking of rot. Sprayed across his face. The bear shook its head, roaring in fury, but it did not fall. They circled in the dark, two broken killers measuring each other's deaths. Kriakk's breath came in ragged sobs. Every heartbeat pumped more of his life onto the alien dirt. The bear's breath was worse, wet, foul, laced with the stench of old kills. It swiped again. He ducked too slow. Claws opened his thigh to the bone. He screamed then, raw and animal, and answered with the rock. Down on the bear's skull. Up again. Down. Each blow landed with a meaty thud that echoed through the night like a war drum. The beast staggered. Its massive head swung low, one eye swelling shut, jaw hanging crooked. Yet still it came, furious, stupid with pain, slamming its bulk into him. They crashed together, Kriakk pinned beneath hundreds of pounds of muscle and rage. Ribs cracked like dry twigs. The rock slipped from his blood-slick fingers. He clawed for it, nails tearing on stone while the bear's jaws snapped inches from his throat. Foul drool burned his skin. With a last desperate surge, he wrenched the rock free and smashed it upward into the soft underside of the bear's jaw. Bone gave way. The beast reared back, howling a sound that was half agony, half defiance. It shook its ruined head, blood streaming from nostrils and mouth, then turned, slow, limping, dragging one shattered leg behind it. The massive shape melted into the blackness, crashing through brush until the night swallowed even the sound of its retreat. Kriakk lay where he fell, chest heaving, the world spinning in slow, nauseating circles. Blood pulsed from a dozen wounds. The rock slipped from his numb fingers and rolled away. Above him, alien stars wheeled in a sky that cared nothing for his survival. He tried to rise. The ground pulled him down again, cold and greedy. Disoriented, half-blind, every breath a knife between his ribs, he stared into the void and whispered nothing at all. Only the wind answered, cold, indifferent, carrying the distant echo of the bear's limping retreat into the endless dark. Kriakk did not rise with hope. He rose because the cold ground drank his blood too greedily, and dying here like meat left for the scavengers was a surrender he refused to gift Sin. Every breath was a blade between his cracked ribs. The gashes across chest and thigh wept fresh crimson as he dragged himself to his knees, the rock still clutched in a fist gone numb and purple. The alien forest pressed close, black trunks like twisted bones, leaves that whispered like dying men, roots that snaked across the dirt like veins, and everywhere, eyes. Tiny pinpricks of sickly green and violet glowing from the underbrush, watching. Not hungry yet, curious, as though the forest itself wanted to see how long this broken thing would last before it became part of the rot. He crawled first, then forced his legs under him. The world tilted. Blood ran down his leg in thick ropes, soaking the strange moss that squelched beneath his boots. He needed shelter before the night's true predators scented him. A fallen log the size of a man lay half-buried 10 paces away, its bark peeled back like flayed skin. Kriakk staggered to it, each step reopening the claw wounds until the pain sang high and bright behind his eyes. He wedged his shoulder under the log and heaved. Muscle tore, blood sprayed. The log rolled with a wet crunch, revealing a shallow depression in the earth, barely a grave, but enough. He dragged armfuls of broken branches, the sharp ends tearing his palms raw, and stacked them against the log at a steep angle, lashing them together with tough, fibrous vines he ripped from the ground. Each knot cost him. The vines cut like wire. Over that crude frame he piled handfuls of the thick black moss that grew everywhere, its spores stinging his open wounds like acid. He packed the gaps with wet leaves and mud scooped from a nearby stagnant pool. The shelter was low, dark, stinking of decay and his own filth, a tomb more than a home. But it would keep the rain off and hide his heat from the larger things that hunted by scent. He crawled inside, collapsing onto the damp earth, chest heaving, the rock never leaving his grip. The eyes never blinked. They ringed the shelter now, dozens of them, small and unblinking, studying the intruder who bled so loudly. Tools came next, because bare hands were death here. Kriakk sat in the mouth of his lean-to and used the rock to hammer another stone he pried from the soil. Sparks flew in the gloom. He chipped and struck until he had a crude blade, jagged, ugly, but sharp enough to draw blood when he tested it on his own thumb. The cut burned like fire. Good. Pain kept him awake. With the new knife, he split green branches into crude spears, fire hardening their tips by scraping them against a rough stone until the points smoked and blackened. He carved notches in one longer stick to make a simple digging tool. Every motion tore at his wounds. Blood dripped onto the tools as he worked, anointing them. Traps and snares were slower, crueler work. He limped in widening circles around the shelter, never letting the eyes leave his back. From the vines he stripped long fibers, twisting them into thin, strong cord, while his thigh wound seeped through the crude moss packing. He found a game trail, narrow, trampled, reeking of musk, and set 3 snares, loops hidden in the brush, anchored to bent saplings that would snap upward if triggered. For larger meat, he built a deadfall near a rotten stump, balancing a heavy flat stone on a trigger stick baited with a scrap of his own bloodied cloth. The eyes followed him the whole time, rustling closer, curious little shadows darting between trunks. Once, something the size of a rat with too many legs skittered across his boot. He crushed it without thinking, the wet pop barely registering over the roar in his ears. Medicine was the worst. He could not stitch the deep gashes with what he had, so he packed them instead. From a clutch of pale, veined fungi growing on the underside of a log, he scraped a foul-smelling paste that burned like molten iron when he smeared it into the claw marks. The pain made him vomit, thin and sour, but the bleeding slowed. He chewed the bitter bark of a stunted tree until his mouth went numb, spitting the pulp into the worst wound on his chest and binding it with more vine and a strip torn from his own ragged tunic. Infection would come anyway. He could already feel the hot throb building, but at least the bleeding had slowed to a crawl. The forest watched, and somewhere in the dark, a small thing chittered as if laughing at his clumsy efforts. Hunger clawed harder than the bear ever had. He scavenged first, grubs the length of his finger, white and writhing under lifted bark. He ate them raw, their bitter guts popping between his teeth, fighting the urge to retch. Berries, the color of old bruises, hung in clusters. He crushed one against his tongue and waited for the poison. It did not kill him, only made his vision swim and his guts cramp. So he stripped the bush bare and forced them down anyway. Meat was harder. At dusk, the first snare twitched. A small furred thing, no bigger than a cat, six-eyed and scaled, thrashed in the loop. Kriakk limped to it, knife ready. It bit him once, teeth like needles, before he drove the blade through its throat. Hot blood jetted across his wrist. He skinned it crudely by the shelter's mouth, the hide coming away in wet strips, then roasted the stringy meat over a tiny fire he kindled with dry moss and sparks from stone on stone. The smoke stung his eyes. The meat tasted of iron and fear. He ate every scrap, cracking the bones for marrow, licking his fingers clean while the watching eyes drew closer still. By the time the second moon rose, thin and blood-red through the canopy, Kriakk sat inside his crude shelter, belly full of stolen life, wounds packed and bound, crude spear across his lap. The rock blade rested beside him. Outside, the forest breathed. Branches creaked. Tiny claws scratched bark. The eyes multiplied, ring after ring of curious, patient hunger. He could feel them measuring him, how much blood he had left, how long before exhaustion or fever took him. Kriakk bared his teeth in the dark, a silent promise to the watchers and to the world that had already tried to kill him twice. He was not prey yet. The fire crackled low. The wind carried the distant limping echo of the bear somewhere far off, still alive, still hating. And Kriakk waited, rock in hand, for whatever came next. Kriakk fed the fire with careful splintered fingers, twigs no thicker than bones, moss that hissed and popped. The stone spear lay half-finished across his knees, a straight sapling shaft, fire-hardened at the tip, bound with vine to a jagged flint head he had napped by lantern light. Each strike of rock on rock sent fresh pain lancing through his bound chest. Blood still seeped from the moss packing, but the flame gave him something to stare at besides the watching eyes. Then the wind shifted. A heavy metallic scent rolled through the trees, rain coming fast and mean. The canopy above rattled like dry skulls. Kriakk rose without ceremony, every joint screaming. He dragged the last armful of black moss over the shelter's roof, weighting it with stones so the coming deluge would not wash his blood scent into every hollow. The fire he smothered to glowing coals, banking them deep in a scooped pit lined with wet leaves. His crude tools, knife, snares, the half-finished spear, he shoved into the deepest corner of the lean-to. Then he crawled inside, pulling the last branch across the mouth like a bone door, and pressed his back to the log wall. The storm hit like judgment. Rain hammered the forest in sheets, turning the ground to sucking mud. Water poured through the gaps he could not seal, soaking his wounds until the pain became a cold, steady burn, Lightning cracked white across the alien sky, illuminating the ring of eyes still watching from the brush, unblinking, patient. Thunder rolled over him like the laughter of gods who had already turned away. Kriakk sat hunched, arms wrapped around his knees, letting the cold wash the fever sweat from his face. He did not sleep. He endured. When the storm finally limped off into the distance, leaving only a dripping hush and the low crackle of rekindled coals, Kriakk crawled out. The fire spat and hissed back to life. He sat beside it on a flat stone, spear now finished and laid across his thighs, the flint head gleaming wet with rain. The forest breathed steam. His wounds throbbed in rhythm with his heart. Memory came unbidden, the way it always did when the fire burned low. He saw the old battles first, red sand arenas on a dozen worlds, the wet crunch of skulls under his boots, the screams of enemies he had broken slowly for the pleasure of it. He remembered the iron rooms where he had been the one chained, lashes that peeled skin from bone, brands that smelled of his own cooking flesh, the laughter of interrogators who wanted names he would never give. Pain and pleasure had long ago become the same color in his mind. Then the firelight shifted, and the memories changed. Sura! The name left his throat in a guttural whisper, simple and resonant, like the crack of stone under frost. That single word had once woven threads of language into his primal mind, teaching a killer how to speak something softer than threats. He saw her again. Ebony-skinned, tall as a blade, eyes like polished obsidian that never looked away. He felt the memory of her touch, calloused palms sliding over the scars on his back, pulling him close in the dark of some stolen ship berth. Their embrace had never been gentle. It had been teeth and nails and desperate hunger, two broken things trying to carve life out of each other before the universe took it back. He remembered the way she had moved beneath him, fierce and unyielding, the low sound she made when pleasure and pain blurred into one, the salt of her skin, the way she had bitten his shoulder hard enough to draw blood while he buried himself inside her, both of them laughing through the hurt because laughter was the only thing the galaxy had not yet stolen. Sura, he whispered again, the sound raw. The fire popped. Instinct slammed into him like a blade between the ribs. Kriakk surged upright, spear in one hand, rock in the other, every nerve screaming danger. The eyes in the forest scattered. The bear exploded through the shelter wall. It came in a roar of splintering branches and wet fury, the same monstrous bulk, one eye still swollen shut, jaw hanging crooked from their last meeting, but now driven mad by pain and the scent of old blood. The lean-to collapsed in a shower of moss and mud. The beast's good paw slammed down where Kriakk had sat a heartbeat earlier, crushing the fire pit and sending coals flying like dying stars. No time to run, no time to think. Kriakk met it head-on. He drove the stone spear straight into the bear's ruined eye socket with every ounce of rage left in his body. The flint head sank deep. The shaft snapped. The bear bellowed, shaking its massive head, spraying blood and splintered wood. Kriakk rolled under the next swipe, claws raking empty air inches above his spine. He came up inside the beast's reach, the old rock clutched in both fists and brought it down on the bear's already broken jaw. Bone cracked louder than thunder. The bear reared, slamming him against the fallen log. Ribs that had only just begun to knit screamed again. Hot breath and drool washed over his face. They grappled in the mud and rain-slick ruin, man and monster, both already half dead. The bear's weight crushed the air from his lungs. Jaws snapped shut on empty space as Kriakk twisted, driving the broken spear shaft upward into the soft throat. Blood gushed over his arms, scalding. The bear thrashed, claws opening fresh trenches across his back. Kriakk roared through the pain and hammered the rock again and again into the side of the skull, once, twice, 3 times, until something vital gave way with a wet, final crunch. The bear shuddered. Its huge body locked rigid, then collapsed sideways, pinning Kriakk beneath a mountain of stinking fur and cooling meat. For a long moment he could not move, only breathe in shallow, bloody gasps while the forest fell silent around them. Slowly, painfully, he dragged himself free. The bear's one good eye stared at nothing. Its chest no longer rose. Kriakk stood over the corpse, swaying, covered in its blood and his own, the broken spear still jutting from its ruined face like a victory banner no one would ever see. He looked down at the dead thing that had come back for him, then up at the indifferent stars. "Sura," he whispered once more, voice hoarse and cracked. The fire had gone out. The eyes in the forest had returned, closer now, hungry for what remained. Kriakk bared his teeth, picked up the largest shard of his spear, and began carving the bear's hide while his wounds bled fresh into the mud. He was still not prey, not yet.
This right here is my favorite thing ever. In the history of forever. I think about this every day. I think about this all night long. I stay awake, not sleeping, because I'm thinking about this.